Alright, hello everybody. Today I have a review of the Tokyo Zodiac Murders for you. It's a book by Soji Shimada. It is a classic murder mystery, one of the big ones that you may have heard about if you know enough about Japanese murder mystery literature. The original book was published in, I think, 1981, and then it was published in English in 2004, question mark? I found a copy of this book while I was in graduate school at the library there and read it then, and I don't remember if it was that new. It felt like it was older than that, but I don't know. I guess it could have been that they got the 2004 copy and then a few years later they had to rebind it. I don't know. But the thing about the Tokyo Zodiac Murders is that the first printings were pretty limited as far as I can tell. I tried to pick up a copy of this book on, like, Amazon or eBay or whatever, and until very recently, it was rather expensive to get a copy of it. And so every once in a while, every year or so, I would maybe remember to go search for it and see if there were any good deals for it. And just a couple of weeks ago, I happened to do that search again and discovered that there was a new printing in 2024. I think with a new translation, I'm not sure. This one's printed by Pushkin Press, but apparently the original was published by IBC Publishing. And this one says its English translation is copyright Ross and Sheikha Mackenzie. So I don't know if they're the ones who did the original translation. I read it, the first time I read it was over 10 years ago, and so it's very hard for me to recall whether this one was, marginally different in translation style compared to the other one. But whatever. This book is available now in English, again, relatively inexpensively. And so I was like, oh, I'll pick up a copy and check it out because I haven't read it in a while, and it was good. In fact, this is the book that got me to look around and find Inspector Imanishi Investigates, or Vessel of Sand is the English translation of the original Japanese title that I did a review of a little while ago. But this is the one that I read 12, 13, 14, 15 years ago, something like that, because it just happened to be in the library, and I was picking up a bunch of random Japanese books there, and happened to get this one and was like, oh, this is actually really good. It is a, how to describe this book is that the Tokyo Zodiac Murders happened far in the past as far as the present day of this book is concerned. The Zodiac Murders happened, the Tokyo Zodiac Murders, not the California ones. I think that was California. But the Tokyo Zodiac Murders happened in 1936, I believe? Yeah, 1936. And this book takes place in 1979, a couple of years before the book was published in Japan. And so it's already kind of an old case, a cold case, if you will. It's been poked at by various people for approximately 40 years, as of the point that this book opens up. And it's a bunch of murders, like, I think it's eight murders, that have a really strange timing and very curious and kind of gut-turning execution in a lot of ways. So, this is the non-spoiler part, just kind of outlining how things are going, so I'll be a little bit vague, but basically the idea is that in 1936, an artist dies, and he leaves behind this very crazy, confession. He calls it his last will and testament, but it's really more of like a confession. And it's full of terminology about, astrology and alchemy. And basically, he basically confesses that he was planning to kill a bunch of his family members, his daughters and nieces. And then, mysteriously, after this guy is dead, a bunch of his daughters and nieces and people related to him suddenly die as well, and their bodies are found in various places over the next year or so. This book opens up in 1979, where already most of the witnesses, the people who were involved in the case, are dead. People have been looking at the case for 40 years, trying to figure out what the hell happened. And our main character, our POV character, Kazumi Ishioka, gets some new information by chance, and he shares this information. Or rather, no, actually, it's the other way around. The character who is not the POV character is Kiyoshi Mitarai, and he goes by Mitarai most of the time because his name has got a funny spelling in Japanese. But he gets information from a woman And basically, his friend Kazumi Ishioka is kind of a mystery buff. And it's like, oh, you've never heard of the Tokyo Zodiac Murders? Well, I'll help you. I'll give you the background. I'll collect the information for you, and then you and me can solve this case together. But they also get this kind of time limit where there's a police officer who's going to expose the new information, which will be very bad for certain people's reputations. And so if they can solve it first, then they can kind of help some people save face. That's kind of the idea of the story. And so during the course of the book, they visit a bunch of places and talk to a bunch of people, and they gather a bunch of information. They put together all the facts as they're known. They put together testimonies from a bunch of different people. They go looking around Japan. They visit Kyoto and Osaka and a couple other places. And the idea is that they're going to solve the Tokyo Zodiac Murders after they've been unsolved for over 40 years. Now, that's kind of all I'll say about the plot for the non-spoiler section, but let's talk about the structure. So the structure of the book, unlike Inspector Imanishi Investigates, this book is set up mostly, not entirely, but a significant chunk of it is dialogue. There's a lot of dialogue. It's almost always one character talking to another, and most of the time it's Kazumi Ishioka and Kiyoshi Mitarai talking with each other. We get some interviews with other characters. We get some kind of POV narration from Kazumi himself, but it's not really it's a fairly small part of the story. The amount of narration per se. Most of the exposition is in the form of dialogue, which has some good points to it, right? It keeps the pace up. It gives a lot of opportunities for character quirks to show up. It has kind of a poppy, quippy, witty feel at times. There's a point where, let's see if I can find it. I think I marked it. It's one of these green things. Is it this one? Ah, yes. So you get a lot of opportunities for the characters to kind of riff off of each other, and so at one point, Kiyoshi says something to Kazumi, and Kazumi replies. He's very angry at Kiyoshi for kind of keeping him in the dark on certain things that Kiyoshi is thinking about. And Kazumi says, You're enjoying watching me suffer, aren't you? To which Kiyoshi replies, no, I'm not. My eyes are closed, right? Lots of little witty bits like that make it a very fun read, and a very, engaging quick read, too. You never feel bored. The pacing, where they called Inspector Imanishi Investigates a thriller, and I thought that person probably didn't actually read the book. This book actually has a lot more thriller-style pacing to it. There's a lot of this is just a thing that was revealed, and now we got to talk about it. This is something that we found. This is something that someone said. This person doesn't want to talk to us, and can we figure out how to make them talk to us, kind of thing. There's a lot of that. Early on, we get all the facts, and the facts include the descriptions of the crimes and how the bodies were found, and those are, clinical, but they kind of have to be, because they're so gross that to describe them, they are extremely gory results. And they're vividly described, but also with kind of an air of clinicalness, because otherwise it would be even more stomach-churning than it already is. It's actually pretty gross at the beginning of the book, where you're like, ugh, right? They're describing all these, the bodies were mutilated like this, and this, and this, and this, and then this happened, and then this person was found like this, and blah, blah, blah. It's pretty gross, but at the same time, it's well-written and well-described. But it has a little bit of that clinical air, which allows you to not... It feels like the book isn't trying to gross you out. It's just telling you the facts. But the facts are so crazy that they're kind of gross out, even if they're mentioned in kind of a critical way or a clinical way as well. And the other thing that this book does really well is it creates this fog of facts. You get overloaded with so many different facts and details and prior theories that people have gone through that you kind of feel like, I got this flood of stuff around me. I have no idea how to make heads or tails of it, so I got to read the next page to see what kind of insight Kazumi or Kiyoshi add to the story. And it's funny because neither of these two characters is actually like a detective in any way. Kiyoshi is like a fortune teller who like moonlights as a detective. It's a little weird and quirky, and it gives his character some strangeness to it as well. And then Kazumi is like a freelance illustrator, and he's just interested in mysteries for mystery's sake. But like, you know, at the same time, he's also got a very good way of describing things that he sees because he's an illustrator. There is, in the middle of the book, there's an extended sequence that kind of makes fun of Sherlock Holmes, but also throws some respect his way as well. Like they're talking about one of Sherlock Holmes' stories, and they're like, well, the idea of you know, there was some element in the Sherlock Holmes story where a snake had to hear something. He's like, snakes don't have hearing, their snakes are deaf, blah, 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 blah. Here's another inconsistency in this Sherlock Holmes story. Here's something that doesn't make sense here. Here's something that doesn't make sense here. But then at the same time, after they get a little bit of poking in, they're like, yeah, but still, there's, you know, there are some interesting aspects of this, and I do like this, and I do like that. So it's not like he's trying to make fun of Holmes necessarily, but he's kind of a little bit of bad followed by a little bit of good. The structure of the book is a little weird, too, because it starts out with Kazumi giving all the facts to Kiyoshi, and then suddenly there's this flashback about a third of the way of the book in to how Kiyoshi got this letter that sheds some new light on the case all of a sudden, and he's like, oh, that's why we kind of got involved in this, and blah 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 blah. That sudden flashback after the first third of the book is like, wait, what? Huh? You know, it's a little bit out of order, but not so bad. Let's see. There are a couple of weird stylistic choices that I was wondering about. Like, for instance, the Japanese names are given as given name followed by family name, right? Or surname is what we... And so a lot of books do it the opposite way, because the way that Japanese names are said in Japanese is surname first, then given name. So there's some that is a little bit weird. Even there was a point where I got confused because they were talking about Natsume Soseki, and I was like, wait, did they do his surname first? And like I had to do this whole thing where I had to look through and check and make sure that they were consistent. I think they were after some extra checking, but like there was a moment where I suddenly became confused. I was like, wait, did they just mention him surname first? And no, they didn't. I went back and looked again. But anyway, there's also some weird things where, like, the dates are given. So another thing about this book is that they give you, like, charts and diagrams of, like, here is the room where so-and-so died. Here's the situation as it looked like when the police got there, kind of thing. So you get a lot of, like, diagrams and maps. And one of the things is that you have all these different dates that the bodies were found, right? And... you know, they say on the page, like, American Convention, month, day, year, which, fine, you do that. But then later in the book, they, like, use the word tires, but spell it with a Y, and I'm like, what's going on here? Like, it's like someone British was trying to be American, but didn't quite know how to do it, or something like that. And so that's one of those things where some proper style guide kind of thoughts would have maybe, you know, helped a little bit. There's also this weird... So there's this weird trend these days of, like, eliminating periods after common abbreviations, like Mr. or Junior. And they do that throughout the whole book. And this is one of those things where, like even Agatha Christie put a period after M when she was writing, you know, Mr. in her books and stuff. So, like, I feel like getting rid of the punctuation marks that show you where what do you call it? Like, abbreviations are, it might help in some ways, but it is one of those things where it's like, is this actually helping or not, right? Because like, you know, MR with no period maybe, but if you get into other abbreviations, maybe it's not so obvious, right? But there was one point where I was like, okay, so they've been getting rid of the periods and the apostrophes and abbreviations all over the place. Then all of a sudden, in the book, they're like, something PM, and it's like lowercase p period, lowercase m period. And it's like, what? Why would you... there's some weird stylistic choices in this book that are a little funny to me, I guess, and it's my own personal quirk, but like, to get rid of all the periods after Mr. and Junior and Mrs. and all that stuff, and then to put 2 periods in PM is just bonkers to me. And then the other thing, and these all might be things that the translators did for whatever reason, right? But there is one really cool little stylistic thing that this book does that other books after it have done, but this may be one of the first. At least, well, I mean, I don't know about that, but I don't know. But what happens in this book is that 2 times throughout the book, there's like a chapter ends, and then literally the next page is like, hey, author Soji Shimada here. You can solve this mystery now. You have everything you need. Good luck with that kind of thing. And he says, like, oh yeah, you should really try to solve this before the end of the next chapters. We're getting toward the end, and you have everything you need now. And actually, I kind of put off putting this in, for a little longer. So you have even more than you need, actually. And then, I'll just read it. It's funny. Message from the author. Gentle reader, unusual as it may be for the author to intrude into the proceedings like this, there is something I should like to say at this point. All of the information required to solve the mystery is now in your hands, and, in fact, the crucial hint has been provided already. I wonder if you noticed it. My greatest fear is that I might already have told you too much about the case. But I dared to do that both for the sake of fairness of the game, and, of course, to provide you with a little help. Let me throw down the gauntlet. I challenge you to solve the mystery before the final chapters, and I wish you luck. Yours sincerely, Soji Shimada. And then there's another one right at the end where it's like, okay, this is it. I'm not going to read that one, but there's another one where it is like, okay, this is it. I'm about to spoil it. So, if you've been putting it off to sit and think about this, now's the time. And then he proceeds with the answer of everything, and it's like, oh wow, that's crazy. It's a really good solution. So I'll just put it there. I think, stylistically, it's a good book. It's fun to read. It's got good pacing. It's got a lot of, really cool mystery hooks in it. There's a lot of facts that are pretty well thought out, and where they appear to not be well thought out, maybe that is also intentional kind of thing. There's a lot going on in this book. It's really solid. And so I think we'll call the non-spoiler section here, and I'll get into a mild plot synopsis in the spoiler section with a few details that maybe you want to skip. So we'll get to that now. All right, the spoiler section. So the book starts with a deluge of facts. It tells you all of this information, and a lot of it is smokescreen because a lot of it is only tangentially related to solving the murder. In 1936, the artist named Heikichi Umezawa died. He was murdered in his studio, and he leaves behind a strange will and testament. This is the thing I mentioned in the non-spoiler section. It's kind of the first part of the book, so it's not really a spoiler. But this thing is full of discussion about astrology and alchemy. And he basically says, I'm going to kill a bunch of my daughters and nieces and mutilate their bodies for alchemical purposes. I'm going to create Azoth, the ultimate woman, and I'm going to use them as parts, basically. And then he provides a lot of details with kind of alchemical and astrological justifications, this person, has the astrological symbol of blah, and I'm going to hide their body in blah. And, this person's astrological symbol is blah, and their body's going to be hidden in blah. And into their mouth I will place a bit of blah, because this element represents this particular, astrological symbol or planet or whatever. But he dies. And, he dies in this weird closed room where, the door is locked, his shoes are in there. There's a bunch of, footprints around the outside that happen to just be shown up in the snow that happened to fall on Tokyo that night. There's evidence that maybe his bed was moved around while he was dying or while he was dead. It looks like he was hit in the back of the head with something hard, but there's no such thing in the studio to show what that is. Nobody knows why he died or how he died, but they find this note, and they're like, wow, this is some really crazy stuff. But, thankfully he died before he could execute any of it. But then, a little bit later, a bunch of his daughters and nieces, including some that weren't mentioned in the note, die. The ones that were mentioned in the note all die approximately at the same time, we think. And then another one of his daughters or daughter-in-laws also dies under suspicious circumstances as well. And so, their bodies are found in these mutilated conditions, just as was written in the thingamajig. And their bodies are hidden in various places, buried to various heights. Latitudes and longitudes take a part and all that stuff. And so, like, the quest, and like, this is never solved. And so over the next 40 years, people are like, well, maybe it was this, maybe it was that, maybe it was this, maybe it was that. And we get a lot of that in the book as well, which provides more smokescreen for us. It's like, well, was it actually Heikichi Umezawa who died? Was it maybe a double? Was it his brother? Was it something like this? Was it something like that? Who left the footprints outside the studio? There was men's prints and there was women's prints, and they were like, some of them were on top of each other and stuff like that. And so it's like, well, who was there? Was it a model that killed him? Was it something else? Did someone witness the murder and not come forward about it? What about the timing of the snowfall? Was this planned, to wait for that kind of thing? How did they get him killed in this locked room where there was no way in or out? The windows are barred and yada, yada, yada. So what happens in the story is that a woman, Kiyoshi is like a fortune teller. And so he has a lot of random people that are coming to ask him to tell their fortunes, mostly women. One woman shows up and she's like, I actually don't want you to tell my fortune. I know that you are like kind of an amateur detective, and I have this letter that my father left to me, and I want you to read it, and I want you to see if you can do anything about it. And basically, this woman gives him a confession. Her father was a police officer around the time of the Tokyo Zodiac murders, and he was seduced by a woman who happened to be the odd one out who was murdered, the daughter or daughter-in-law of Heikichi, who was not mentioned in the note. She died too, by murder, and more, there's other details and stuff as well. But like, that police officer was like, yeah, she seduced me, and then I left, and I thought nothing of it, and suddenly I discovered that she was killed approximately the time I was with her, which seems impossible to me because I was there, but I couldn't come forward about it because I was there for, unethical reasons. And then I got this message that proclaimed it was basically a blackmail message, and it was proclaimed that they were like the Japanese equivalent of the CIA. Like, oh, these people were spies and we killed them and we need you to hide their bodies for us. So this happened 40 years ago, and this guy left this note on his deathbed. He's like, this is my confession. And of course, if this got out, it would be horrible for his whole family. They would be very dishonored. And so the woman is like, can you actually use this to solve the murders? And then if the murders are solved, then we don't need to worry about releasing this letter. And so Kiyoshi basically agrees to solve it. And then suddenly, like the next day, the woman's brother shows up, who's the son of the officer who died. He's like, I'm going to release this publicly, and Kiyoshi's like, give us a week. If you give us a week, we solve it, then we can burn the letter, and your whole family doesn't have to suffer the dishonor of this thing coming out. And so he's like, okay, fine, you've got a week. It's not very well. It felt to me, and this could be a cultural thing, but it felt to me like it wasn't very well motivated why this guy was like, this has to be released ASAP when it hadn't been released for 40 years. And it seems like it would have dishonored his family as well. So I don't know exactly what what was going on there, or why, solving the murder allows them to get rid of the letter. It's a little fuzzy on the motivations there, but that's the way that the author sets it up, as like, here's how they decided to deal with this problem. And so, it is what it is. It's one of the few points in the book where I was like, I'm not sure I understand the motivation here, right? Other than that, the book is very human, very, very sensible. And so basically, they agreed to solve the murder in a week. They go on this trip. They visit Kyoto and Osaka, and they run around interviewing a bunch of people. There's a bunch more facts and smokescreen that shows up. There's a bunch of... So Shimada does a really good job of making things feel like they're important when they're not. It's like they're not... Like they are red herrings, but they don't feel like red herrings even after you discover that they're red herrings, if that makes sense, right? Like Agatha Christie does stuff where, oh, this was a red herring, and this was designed to divert your attention, kind of thing. The way that I phrased this, your attention is here when it really should be over here. In this book, there are a lot of unnecessary facts that aren't helpful to solving the case, but they all feel like they're part of solving the case because the case happened so long ago. People are like, well, maybe it was this. Well, let's think about this. Let's consider it, right? And they're never like, oh, this. There's never like a trick where your attention is put somewhere when it should be elsewhere. It feels very natural, is what I'll say about the red herrings in this book. And so they don't feel like red herrings. They feel like the kinds of facts that you would collect in an investigation that are indeed facts, but happen to divert your attention rather than being deliberately intended to divert your attention. And of course, there is a red herring aspect that is intended to divert your attention because the answer to the murder is something, other than what people thought was going on. But even that feels very, realistic to me, I guess, is the way to put it. So we got all these facts, we got the smoke screen. The author himself pauses the book to tell you, hey, now you can figure it out. We've given you everything you need, including an important hint. And then the story keeps going. Kazumi is running around searching for people to talk with him. Kiyoshi kind of goes AWOL during a chunk of the story. And a couple days later, Kazumi finds him, and he's basically sleeping on a bench like a homeless person. And he's like, no, I don't know. There's this whole nonsense. And then all of a sudden, there's one more thing that happens, and Kiyoshi's like, oh, I solved the case. And you're like, wait, what? And so then the author hops in once more. He's like, okay, I'm gonna tell you the answer. So if you don't want the answer, if you want to try to figure it out stuff, now is the time to do that. And then Kiyoshi gives a solution. It turns out that the culprit is actually still alive, and that there is another letter from beyond the grave, which does feel very Christie-like. It feels very much like 10 Little Indians or And Then There Were None, right? Where, we don't have a motivation for why this person did this thing, performed this deed. And then at the very end of the book, someone finds a letter in a bottle that it's like, oh, well, this is the answer, and here's the motivation that we've solved the mechanics of the case, but now let's understand why. And the book closes up, and it's very, very well done. And so, I'm not going to spoil any of that stuff. I mean, this is the spoiler section, but that's so I can give a few more details. I'm not going to spoil the mystery because it's absolutely worth reading. So from here, let's go into the conclusion. All right. In conclusion, this is a super classic murder mystery from Japan. This is one of the big ones, right? This is one of the ones that became an international hit because it was so well done. It is not super heavy in cultural minutia like Imanishi investigates. This is not a snapshot of Japanese culture in the 30s or in the 70s. There's a little element here and there of that, but it's not really that significant. There's I didn't bring you a souvenir, I'm sorry. And there's a few things about saving face for the family, but realistically, this is not the cultural snapshot that Imanishi was. However, reading this book got me involved in reading other Japanese mystery books, and this is how I found the Imanishi book in the first place. So that's cool, right? Imanishi was a good book. If it wasn't a thriller, but it was an excellent cultural snapshot, and it was an excellent police procedural. This is a genuine thriller, right? This book is actually thrilling to read, where you're hanging on every next word to discover if there's something in there that might be a clue, or that someone has a idea about something. You're always waiting for that next little hint to show up. And I would even say that it's better executed as a mystery. It is more thrilling, and also the mystery is more fascinating and more fascinatingly presented to the reader. And so the execution is excellent. It is an excellent master class in how to weave a fog of facts to confound the reader. And this is something that mysteries often either avoid or do poorly, right? Where they get off on someone's drinking problem from 10 years ago, and you're like, this has nothing to do with anything. And I know it has nothing to do with anything. And it's not even really developing the characters or whatever. It's just kind of the side issue. This book is here's a fact, and here's another fact, and here's another fact, and here's 10 more facts, and here's 20 more facts, and here's some interpretations of those facts that people have tried over the years. Here's why they have flaws. Here's another set of facts. Here's some possibilities. Here's what people, discovered when they tried to explore those possibilities. There's a lot of stuff there for you to look at and think about, a lot of puzzle pieces to play around with. And not all of them are important, not all of them are relevant, but all of them feel like they could be relevant, and that's the real trick. It has some deliberate obfuscation of facts, but it's done in a way that doesn't feel like it's trying to play with you as a reader. The murderer set up certain things to ensure that the murderer was less likely to be caught, and that makes sense, as opposed to like, hi, I'm Agatha Christie, here's a conversation, but you should really be looking over here while this conversation is happening, kind of thing. So, there are a few red herrings, and there's a lot of irrelevant information, but it feels like it could be relevant, and it's presented in such a way that everybody else is like, well, is this relevant or not? You're never told this is relevant. You're like, here's a fact. Now the question is it relevant? Can you make it relevant? Can you make it fit into this situation, or is it just a puzzle piece that goes to a different puzzle somewhere? That's kind of the question. And the way that it's done is very satisfying, and it doesn't ever feel like you're being toyed with. And so, what I'll say is that it was amazing to read this book again after so long. I'm glad for a new printing that makes it more affordable. I highly recommend this book if you like mysteries at all. And yeah, I'll put a link in the description, all that good stuff. So that's my review of the Tokyo Zodiac Murders by Soji Shimada. This new printing, it's been so long since I read the earlier edition that I can't tell you if there were any like details of the translation that this one got wrong or the other one got wrong or whatever. But it all works. The messages from Soji Shimada are in there with their same playful tone, which makes it very fun. It's a great little book to read. It's decently long, about 300 pages, a little more than that, and it's just a really solid mystery that is good. It's good especially if you like to try to solve mysteries yourself, because the solution is really, really clever. And even with the solution, like, even when I remembered the solution, I didn't remember how the solution fit into the remainder of the story. I was like, wait, okay, I remember that hint, and I remember what that hint was for, but I don't remember how that hint leads to the solution, but I don't remember how the solution, fits into the rest of the story. And so, after having not read this for like 15 years or something like that, it was really fun to go through it again, and I really enjoyed it. And if you like mysteries, you'll probably like it too. Definitely sit down and take some time to think about it when Shimada tells you to think about it, and see if you can figure it out, because I certainly couldn't the first time I read it. So anyway, that's what I've got. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time with who knows what. Have a good one.